of visibility. And the science around the ocean is in the need of visibility. We're in a time where the science of the ocean and the science of climate is questioned and doubted and things like that. And although there's a lot of it out there, there needs to be a good PR. There needs to be a PR for the ocean. It needs its own public relations firm to bring it up to the stature of, say, space, which has this huge following and love, and everybody. The oceans seem to not get quite the love, and they represent far more important to the world. So our goal is to conduct ocean science on a research vessel we have, Coast Ocean Explorer, which is a large renovated vessel, and it was a petroleum exploration vessel that we totally tore apart and turned it into like the most amazing state-of-the-art research vessel. And so Ian's been there. It's a fantastic vessel. So we use that as a kind of a focal point for our conservation efforts. And Veronica, who's on the phone with me, is leading our program. She's an amazing administrator and works with the program and is helping us lead a sort of an outreach program for the vessel and for the program, which is just beginning. So we're really at the talking stages about how we can help share the experience of the vessel and ocean, but also sort of almost more importantly, how we can get a younger viewpoint on this, how we can get young people, because it's going to be your earth that you're going to inherit, and you can speak more convincingly to your generation about what the ocean needs and about science, and you can communicate the needs. And I would argue, and I think Ian has a good handle on this, your posts and your products need to first and foremost be entertaining. They need to be interesting. They need to be exciting. People need to want to click on them, right? If it's a downer, then it's not going to work. So part of what OceanX is about is highlighting science, which is sort of, just to be blunt, is inherently very boring to most people, to highlight it and to elevate it to a stature of interest, and to package it in an entertaining way, to tell the science and also try to induce behavior change, right? Because the goal of all this isn't just to entertain, but rather to entertain with impact. And you're more than familiar with this, given where you stand in your life, and you are the holders of that future. And we want to meet you, and we want you to help us with that. And we want to find those of you very motivated around production of media, production of social media, production of real media, that will truly engage, educate, and activate the public. That's our mission. We have very professional organizations that we collaborate with. We collaborate with National Geographic, we collaborate with Disney, with Microsoft, with BBC, with the world leading distribution outlets and educational. But we need you as well. We need young people. We need people who are starting out, who have vision, have voice, and have made a commitment to this kind of thing, who want to be filmmakers, who want to be documentarians, who want to tell factual stories, and who want to also make them exciting and think that way. So our goal is to develop programs that would help engage, and we also want a diverse audience. We need a diverse voice. We absolutely need a diverse voice. I'll be blunt with you that oceanography, marine science, is dominated by white dudes, right? And we don't need more of that. We have a lot of that, but we need different voices and we need different opinions, and we need to encourage and inspire a different generation to join this endeavor. So that is why we're reaching out to you guys to help us to think this through, to think about how to do it. And what we would in return would offer opportunities. We're not quite sure how these will work yet. And this is something we're working together with Ian and other people at your school. And we're working with universities across the country, but your school in particular, to try to figure out ways that we can ask you to help us, and you can become part of the project, part of the program. So what we have to provide is a huge amount of original content, in that the vessel produces content. It's a massive content producer. It's a unique content producer. And we need creative minds to take that content and help it into that 360 media world that we live in, which includes shorts and films and non-linear serialized material, social media posts, a whole range of ways in which you guys all communicate now, in which the world communicates now. We need help at amplifying our message in that way. So it's a kind of a two-way dialogue. It's a dialogue where we're learning and we're educating ourselves on these non-traditional media formats and how we can best. We have an enormous social media following on our own already. We've grown that almost exponentially over the past 2 years, and we're continuing to grow that. But we also I want to look into other types of short-term TikTok type media, YouTube, things like that. We've done a lot of that, but need more and need a useful voice. So that was the genesis of this conversation. How's that, Ian?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
And so that we could have questions to talk about it, and we can have a little bit of, maybe, I don't know, Ian, what you think, maybe a kind of a two-way conversation, because I don't want to just
yeah, that would be fantastic. Veronica, maybe we could hear a bit from you about what you're researching, what you're finding, and how we're going to, really diversify our voices.
Okay, so we are working on, which is, at the very early stages. We had, Vincent had the task of sort of leading this diversity initiative with respect to our crew, our media, our scientists aboard the vessel. So my role in this is to sort of organize a bunch of people to come together and figure out where can we find those people that we're looking for, that have the talent, that have the interest, that want to be, or may not know what they want to do. But we know that, for example, the crew on the boat, there's a certain trajectory, there's a certain, you may not need to go to school for something, but you may not know what you want to do. This may be the perfect opportunity for you. And what we want to do is make that information available to those that would otherwise not have access to that information, which are, a variety of neighborhoods in, metropolitan cities. And so we wanted to, use this opportunity to reach out to, not just our, college students, our grad students. We want to, go as far down to the high school kids that are saying, I don't know what I want to do, but I'm interested in, ocean things, or I love being on the water, and say, if you do X, Y, and Z, you can do this thing. And, light bulbs go off, and now you're in a whole new realm of possibilities for the way that your life could progress. So that's sort of the nutshell of where I sort of fit into this particular project.
Perfectly said, Veronica. And it's sort of, we look at it as like reducing a little bit of the barriers, or helping. I grew up as a poor kid in a small town in Florida, and I didn't know what it meant to be a scientist. I didn't know how to get there. I didn't know what a PhD was versus an MD versus a this. And so all of us probably aren't quite certain. I don't know to this day, and I run the organization, how to become a deckhand, on a boat, or how to become a documentary filmmaker, and there's not one way, of course, there are multiple ways. So what we're doing is Veronica and I and Ian are putting together kind of testimonials and firsthand interviews with people who describe those situations from our own organization. So people can watch them, very short little clips. They can watch them and say, oh, that's what it takes to be a deckhand, or that's what happens, how you become a galley, or that's how you become a captain or a PhD scientist, so that's how I became it, or they're different routes to the same goal. So just to provide that, as Veronica said, and then provide the resources of those organizations, so people can then say, okay, I do want to go do this. I'm going to try. This is a path I can try to use to get on the boat, and not, I don't know how to get there. Now I have a better understanding. So the site is meant to kind of be a clearinghouse of that kind of information, and make connections between people with interest who normally don't know how to get there, almost like a little guidance counseling about how to get your way into these. Maybe you see one of these documentaries and you see, wow, I love what these people are doing. How do I get to do that? Any of you can do that, right? It's a matter of just picking it and focusing on it and knowing the route it takes to get there. So that's a project that we're involved in. And we also are involved in trying to educate the next generation of young people on the vessel directly through internships and programs that we're currently developing. So that's it in a nutshell, Ian.
Yeah, well, and I'd like to use this opportunity as I'm teaching the students, like, you always got to ask questions. If you're creating a content portal with all these resources, we actually have our target audience right in front of us. And so I actually reflected back to the students, what are some of the things and resources that you'd like to see on a type of guidance portal to help careers move in certain places? If that makes any sense. So it's basically, you guys are in this position of looking, you're about to graduate, you're about to enter into the workforce. What is it that you would be looking for in a portal that has a lot of information about a potential career?
Don't be shy.
There's Leilani, go ahead.
Hi, thank you both for coming to speak to us today. Regarding the question, as a child, I was always very inquisitive. So when I went to research things, I would do it in the most complete depth that I could. And one of the things that I take interest in is specifically what roles are there on the ship, within the company? What are some roles that maybe are really, really interesting, but aren't talked about as much? Or aren't as highlighted. That's what I would be interested in, because that could be something that I would take an interest in or have the want to at least try out.
I think you captured that perfectly, Milana. That is precisely what Veronica and I proposed as an idea, because even all of us who work in it didn't know these existed. Until you've been on a boat, until you've worked amongst all these people, you don't realize these jobs. You see certain career trajectories are so common, but there's so many other ones that are so exciting and interesting. So very good point. And that's precisely what I think we would try to capture with these testimonials. They'd also tell you about these strange and wonderful jobs that are really fun and how people got there. What was it? And almost every one of them has a slightly non-traditional path. They went this direction and they found this at some point. They said, no, that's what I want to do. And then they just went after that. And so, yeah, thank you. That's a good comment.
Jana, do you want to help me?
Sure. Valenci?
This is kind of following up on what Leilani said. I think it would be really important. I know for me anyways, when I'm looking at potential internship opportunities, what would be the long-term goal after that? Would there be potential for like a full-time position, or a permanent position going forward? And then would that also lead maybe towards mentorships in the future for that same role for future interns? I think that would be really important. As far as I know, being an intern right now, that's one of the most important things to me, is where can I move forward in that organization?
Good point.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, Vince, it just speaks to what you were saying on Monday about, it's not just about Ocean X, right? So it's actually about Scripps and Woods Hole and all these different organizations, the BBC, National Geographic. So if we do our job well, it's not just an internship here, but it's opening up doors into a group of other organizations that you can start exploring, your choose your own adventure in the science and media industry, if you will.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I always thought of put the job in your mind's eye. Like once you look at everything that happens, like you said, you find that thing eventually, may not now, but you'll find that thing. I really want to spend my life doing that. And then our goal is that hopefully the page will help explain to you what educational things you would need, what kind of experience you would need, and where to get to that point. So maybe you want to be working as a ROV pilot. Maybe you want to drive submersibles, right? How do you get to that point? What are the educational requirements? What is the experience requirements? And where can you physically go to get that? Once you announce that in your mind and say, I want to try that, then our hopeful that you'll be able to look on this site and you'll be able to say, well, here's a way I can get there. Because these are, if you ask them, how do you become a submarine pilot? It's not an obvious answer to that question, right? And how do these guys become submarine? It's not like submarine pilot school, right? Or if you want to work on a vessel and you like cooking, do you want to cook on a vessel? There's a process to do that. It's not quite the same as being a chef everywhere else. It's similar, but not identical. There are no requirements. But if you're going to be a chef at a restaurant, wouldn't it be great to be a chef on a ship where you're traveling all over the world, right? Meeting and doing great things. So, there's, for us, someone who sees that and says, boy, I love the ocean and I don't want to just sit in a restaurant. I want to be out on the water. Then, what is the process to getting into your ship's license and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I hope that what we provide. And we are obviously in contact with a bunch of organizations, as Ian met, outside of our own, Schmidt Ocean, Rev Ocean. There's a lot of philanthropic organizations. Then there's also the government. We're very in contact with UNOLS and the other fleets. So, and a lot of filmmakers, right, and scientists. So that's why we're kind of at the middle of that, where we hopefully can provide lots of different avenues one could go to get where you want to be.
Kaylin?
Hi everyone. Thank you for coming, Vincent. And sorry, I forgot the name of the other person. Veronica. Yeah, Veronica. Basically, I am noticing that when you bring up testimonials, what jumped out on me is that I normally associate that with video content. So I was wondering what your ideal way to tell that story of people's testimonials is, and if there are other formats you're looking at to be able to do so.
Yeah, and actually Ian helped educate me a little bit on this. Our thought was, we have a series of questions. Like I thought to myself, well, if I want to be a sub pilot, so how do I do that? And so our thought was ask a series of questions. What's your name? What's your job? What do you do every day? How did you get here? And they would talk their way through that. And it's a bit of a talking head video that they would film themselves with a phone camera. But we also felt, well, it would be also good to do a little, sort of B-roll, we would call it, like shoot them doing what they're doing a little bit, so it's sort of a background, but make them short and pithy so people could get through them in 2 minutes. But I think written ones would be helpful too. But I always feel that, to your point, I think people respond better to visuals. But did you have another idea? Is there another suggestion that you had in mind, or?
Well, I think you could go a couple different routes. You could have that 2-minute one, and then you could have deep dives like podcast form. So let's say someone wants to be, a sub pilot. They're not going to just want those 2 minutes. You can say at the end, oh, here's a podcast. We talked to him for an hour, his whole career trajectory. How did he get there? And that you can go really deep into that in that way. And I also think with that 2-minute visual, it gives you a lot of like being able to bring in the audience more or less, because you get to see, one, their day to day, and two is you can spice it up a lot. I mean, you guys are doing some awesome work in the middle of the ocean. Like the potential for getting amazing shots and being able to implement that into a video is huge. So I think those two formats would be amazing. And also you can always expand it, art people might want to read, so you can put the podcast on paper or just do normal articles about people. So there's it seems like every single thing is open. It's just depending on who your target audience is and how you want to convey the info.
It's so funny because Ian, we just had this conversation with Ian, and it was Ian's suggestion. And I thought it was a great one, was to include the secondary longer, because Ian and I did a few interviews, and all you have to do is ask these folks about their life. And of course, they have these amazing lives, almost without a doubt. Every one of them has gotten there through strange things. One was a treasure hunter, one was a deep oil rig diver. They've all had these amazing lives. So they go on, and you just want to hear more and more and more. So I think the podcast format is a great idea. So like give the 2-minute kind of teaser, but people who want to go deeper have a deeper dive. So I think actually, Ian, that's kind of a great idea, Caitlin.
Leilani?
Hi, it's me again. I had a question surrounding like children's content. I work with kids. It's usually a summer job, but I'm taking a gap year and it's going to be like a full-time job for me. But kids are always really interested in the ocean. And I was wondering if you have ever thought about making children's content to foster the love for the ocean rather than building on interest, or in addition to building on interest of those like in high school.
Yes, definitely. We have an entire sort of educational plan, let's put it that way. We have interesting partners in this to try to do this. National Geographic has a large, one of the issues that we've had with children is access. So we're working with a book company to write books, short, like sort of who are they books, but also media, is to get it into the right hands, to produce educational material that's endorsed and used by educators. So we're in the discussions for that kind of thing to get an audience, because what we can't afford to do is create content that doesn't get watched, just to be completely blunt, because it's too expensive and too challenging. So we sort of need help, because we're not a distributor, we need help, and we're pursuing these now, on places that can take our content and distribute it amongst that age range in a manner that warrants the amount of cost it's going to be to create it. So we're 100% there with you. We've done classroom things, we've done small groups, but it really, time-wise, would be great to do it on a larger scale. So it is, and there's obviously so much to love about the ocean. And I think that as I mentioned at the top of the hour, like the idea that we're all here to try to protect an ocean that's in need, is a theme that while it's important, is also not a very happy theme. So the theme around animals and the excitement that we all feel about the ocean, we need to get that going in people and in children early on, and foster it. And don't forget it. Don't lose track of it as you get older, as you start voting. When you're voting, you should think about the ocean. When you walk in that voting booth, that should be a priority for you, in addition to all the other priorities you have, later in life. And when you buy and you do these things. So children are essentially the place you have to direct. So I'm completely agreeing with you. We have it. We haven't done a lot yet with it, I have to say. It is something we've been negligent to see come to the finish line. But like you said, we've had these discussions, and I think within the year you'll start seeing products come out that are directed at children.
Evangelina?
Oh.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming. I wanted to ask, I was kind of thinking about how live events would maybe fit in with OceanX, and I know accessibility is an issue when it comes to live events in COVID, since a lot of live events have to live as in question and answers on Zoom or something, or when COVID, the restrictions get lifted a little bit, doing in person, because I work with I'm currently in the Pollock internship on campus, where we do Q&As with directors or script writers or things of that area. And I think it's really effective to people will come for the chance just to meet somebody and see them in person. So I don't know if live something that OceanX would be open to doing.
Yeah, definitely. We've done several. Again, it's about reach for us. So we always want to partner. So for example, we had a big Microsoft event last week, 2 weeks ago. Microsoft, we're collaborating with Microsoft on 3-dimensional visualization of ocean data, as well as holographic collaboration. So they have these HoloLens, which is this amazing, mixed reality headset. It's not a VR headset, but an AR headset. That's, if you haven't seen it, I recommend looking at it. It's kind of the future. It allows you to place objects into space and talk to people who aren't in the room in 3 dimensions. It's quite an amazing thing. So we've been developing with them. So they had a live event, and then after that live event, I did a series of kind of Q&A periods with Jim Cameron, who is our executive producer on our program, the director who did all these films, and we did these amazing live Q&As. And again, because it's him, more than any rest of us, but also because the outlets made these connections, there were hundreds of people on those calls, and they could write and type in, and they have to be managed, of course, because there's always problems with those things. People coming in and bombing them and things like that, causing problems. But you also just need to manage the large content and the interest. So we are all about that. And the good thing about the ship is that when I designed the ship, we built into it very high bandwidth satellite connections and studio facilities to allow us to produce. We had seen other people doing kind of live events on ships, and if they're not produced, they are just painfully boring, right? If you really have to appreciate until you see unproduced, like if you watch NFL football, you're watching an incredibly produced event, and it's an unbelievably how they move quickly between segments, they keep going, and no dead time, to have that kind of production value, you really need professionals. So yes, it's a great thing. It has to be really planned out well. If you're going to do a mixture of interviewing and live visualization and pre-recorded, that's what we're working on at the moment. Those take production, and they're beautiful when they happen because they pop and they move quickly, and you get the Q&A, so we've done some good ones. We've done some ones that I would consider somewhat boring, so I'm always on the outlook for how we produce it. I think the notion that somehow people are just going to show up and be entertaining is not generally the case. You have to get the right voices, the right people, and then you have to surround it by other products of other short videos, and someone walking around the boat, and Ian's got a lot of experience in that kind of thing, and he knows the tenor with which you speak when you're doing live, and how you answer questions, and not a lot of ums and ahs. It's a whole skill to that. So you get the right people to do that, and you get the large audience. It's magic. So we're 100% into the event thing. It'd be great to do that. Fun VR events, right? So filming a VR event live is an interesting idea, where you walk around the boat and people can talk to you and say, what's over there? And they're all looking in all the various directions with a VR headset. A lot of great ideas around that. Yeah. But again, it all requires smart minds and people who are know about that and understand how to produce that and think about it. That's why I think for you guys in this space, it's just a huge opportunity in the future for all kinds of things like that. Be producers on that kind of content.
Yeah, I'd like just to bookmark that for the class as a future discussion. How do we create, especially in this era of Zoom, create something that's really dynamic and interesting, right? That other people can cue in and watch, right? That's one of our assignments that's coming up. So start thinking about that. And if anybody has any great ideas for Vince, just each one of your answers to me spurs a desire to ask a follow-up question to you, which is like, oh, what type of content is working for kids right now, right? In this new media landscape, like what's working at home for these young people? What live events have you guys been watching that works for you, right? Because what was working, 2 years ago is totally different now.
And, we produced a video game. That video game is coming out in VR. We're trying, we're playing, we're testing the waters in all these different spaces to see how we can best do this, how we can best engage an audience in something that's novel. And, the competition is enormous in the space that you guys are working in. You're up against Marvel and Star Wars, for grabbing people's attention. You're trying to grab people's attention with real things. So you the challenge, the bar is high. But it can be done, and that's it's more important to produce a 3-minute video on the ocean than it is to produce a 2-hour movie on Star Wars, because one is real and the other is not. And one is very entertaining and I love it all. But for the society and for everybody, those kind of events are far more important. I'll tell you that Microsoft's future around this is that you're standing around a room with headsets on and you're looking at people, and Ian's seeing a little bit of that. You're seeing your friends stand there in 3 dimensions standing next to you. And also, Jim Cameron is standing next to you, and Barack Obama, right? That's the future of this kind of interactive media. It's not going to be us looking at each other on Zoom. It's going to be us standing in a room together and interacting as best as possible without physically being in the room with each other, where I can walk around you and I can stand behind you and I can stand in front of you. That's the future of 3D capture that you're going to see, or your children are going to be playing with. So be ready for that. That's going to happen. It's already, the technology's in the work and is being built. So you're going to have to rethink how you produce your media when it becomes a 3-dimensional world.
I just want to cue that, right? Like photography and video cameras, the whole thing is going to change. Like, how do you capture something in a 3-dimensional format, right? And I know Chris Jenkins, my colleague here, has been pushing to create a studio on campus that allows just that, right? This idea of 3D capture plus immersive environments with acoustics, and you start thinking about the dynamic qualities of all of the new technology that has to go into that. And these are career opportunities for you guys, right? Like, just to be able to capture something in 3 dimension and know how to do a 3D photograph, it's kind of a big deal.
It is. And I would say, let me give you an example. If you're driving your ROV on the bottom of the ocean and you're coming upon strange creatures, would you rather watch it on this screen in 2 dimensions? Or would you rather have those objects peeling out on your floor of your living room, and you get to walk around them as they come off? As the vehicle moves across the terrain, you're seeing it in real time develop on your floor of your kitchen. And you can stand there and you can walk around it, and your friends are looking at it, and you can say, what's that? And you can get down on your knees and look at it. That's the future, right? And that's a whole different type of media, as Ian is saying. The camera has traditionally given us a frame, and filmmakers have used that frame to grab your attention and move you. And that's the art of filmmaking. That's going to be quite different in the future when you are no longer constrained by that. Filmmakers films are still hugely popular because a filmmaker has a vision and it directs your thought, and everything is brought that way. But there will be a different type of media that will bring things to you in real time, and you'll be interacting with it. And how you do that and how we interact with it is going to shape the future. So we're trying to get ahead of that curve in what we do by capturing that. And we not only have the problem of capturing 3D, as Ian said, which is very challenging. We try to do it underwater at 6,000 meters. That's the real challenge, right? That's a technological and a creative challenge, but
And I would add to that, right? There's the display, which is one thing, but the real challenge is how to make it a story, right? Because we watch movies because they're stories. We don't watch it because of the special effects, really, right? In the end, the real challenge, just as the early days of cinema had to develop a language in which to take, a moving train and start creating stories, the reaction to the moving train, right? This is where innovation, and if you start thinking about it now and start contemplating and working with, you're going to position yourself well for that technology in the future.
Sort of the reason VR has not caught up as much in the theater. Directors don't like it because they want you to look straight ahead. When they're showing a show, they want you to follow the action. They don't want you to turn around and look behind you, because that's not what, if they wanted you to look behind you, they'd turn the camera around. So so the storytelling is intimately built into how people film, right? And that will probably be the case going forward,
And I think you said something, Vince, about your buddies there interacting with the, deep sea slime, right? That's what I'm seeing with my kids, right? They're on Roblox and Minecraft, and the graphics aren't even that good, but they're interacting with each other. They're creating a virtual play that's for hours and hours. They're in this virtual theater, right? Around something that's not graphically that interesting. I mean, okay, I'm a little looks like a throwback to the 80s Atari. And they're like, for hours, they're into it. So that's reality. I'm paying attention to what my kids are doing, where their hours are being spent. And now I'm starting to say, oh, okay, wow, what if I took that and started creating a moment in which they're not only are they seeing the deep sea slime and learning about it, but they're able to hang out with their buddies.
Yeah, and video games have given us that collaborative gameplay. The technology behind collaborative gameplay is ripe for other things. It is an advanced, very complicated technology that they employ to play multi-user video games. Like Fortnite is an incredibly complicated back engine to that, to run that thing. You're running hundreds of those games with hundreds of players that all have to be, it's a very advanced, and to reapply that, which is now beginning to happen for other types of media, it's going to be a world. It's going to be exciting,
Yeah, and I like to make a throw to one of our another professor at UCSB who is all about environmental programming and video games and these alternative media. And it's a very challenging. If you try to make an environmental game, you'll fail, right? Like there's an understanding. You can come in with this great concept about teaching kids about the importance of the ocean and how important that is and why that's important, and your game was going to fail, right? Unless you start understanding that the game has to be fun. It has to have a narrative. It has to, all these interesting things have to happen in that language. It's just like cinema, just like VR. They're all languages that we have to learn and get good at in order to make sure that we earn and have the permission to have the attention of the audience.
Liliana?
Hi, so I have a few questions and ideas. So first, going back to kind of what you were talking about with Q&A sessions or just educational videos or the podcast idea, which I think is really good to give an in-depth information. But another idea and another tool that I think organizations don't really take advantage of is going live on Facebook or Instagram. And so let's say Instagram, I think it's really good because it's very interactive. You could get a lot of views on going live, which, okay, it has its disadvantages because you can't record it or post it later. But like I said, it's very interactive. And right when you go live on Instagram, it automatically sends a notification to all your followers. And a lot of times, honestly, people click on it accidentally, but then they're on the live, and then you could have Q&A sessions there. And I think for sure you could do 2 people, so you could even do an interview, but I think you could go up to 3 maybe, but that's just an idea. And then I also wanted to ask, I know you mentioned earlier that you wanted to start doing like TikTok or YouTube, but what platforms are you on right now? And are there any more that you want to explore?
Well, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I mean, we have a LinkedIn account, you know, it's just sort of as to recruit people, not as an entertainment account, but we have that. And that gets quite a lot of hits actually, because Ray Dalio actually does a lot of educational material around finance through LinkedIn. He feeds us. So actually, oddly enough, that turns out to be a good feeding source. We post a lot of YouTube videos. We have video channels. I think that's it. The problem with the problem with social media as being the only outlet, in my own opinion, and again, is that it's harder for you to capture your audience in a certain way. You know, you're constrained by the nature of what they are, and also, I'm not sure that the future of some of these platforms is going to be challenging if those platforms begin to compete and begin to be not particularly nice to their audience in the way that we would like it to be. In other words, you're at the behest of those platforms. So you'd like to transition or get your audience to also view longer content that's maybe associated with websites, things like that. So you're not going anywhere. You're not leaving those medias, but you like to try to draw them to your own media that you're more in control of. So you have less of that, because you're basically, when you do a really great job on Instagram, you're supporting Instagram heavily, you know, right? And they're supporting Instagram. Everybody's supporting Instagram rather than supporting an underlying cause or an organization, you know. So we always try to think about how to multiplex what we do. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think Ocean X would be really great on TikTok though, because unfortunately, like people's attention span is really short. So that could get their attention, especially if you're like showing videos on like ships or something. I feel like that would get a lot of views because people are really interested in seeing that, since they never really see that ever.
I agree.
And that could lead you to the website.
Yeah, TikTok is I actually we've talked a lot about it, and I don't know honestly if we've gone there yet. We will certainly be there. There were problems with TikTok at first relating to IP and other things that make it challenging. And there was the issue with China that sort of also kind of engaged us. We do produce a lot of media that's shown in China. So, you know, we sort of watch other folks, but I'm sure that we'll probably be on there if we're not already, if I've just somehow missed it. Yeah, it's certainly a powerful platform and a specific platform. You know, it has a specific tone to it, which is quite different from any other social media platform.
Yeah. And then, sorry, I just have one last question.
Sure.
But what steps are you taking to make Ocean X more diverse? And I know that, you know, you expressed that you're very passionate about this, really interested for the future of Ocean X. And, you know, we can tell that you're putting in the effort to talk to like college students in different college classrooms. And thankfully, like colleges are becoming more diverse. But I was just wondering, like, what other plans or steps do you have for that?
Well, last year, and I'll be honest, and Veronica could chime in because she was part of this thought process. We, you know, we're taken aback, and we all know this goes on, but I think we felt it stronger than we've ever felt it as an organization last year. And so what came out of last year for us was kind of a three-pronged approach. We decided that as a group, we would try to make an effort in three particular areas. One was to diversify internally Ocean X, to diversify the people involved in Ocean X. And we have a somewhat diverse, but not that diverse group. So that was one of our goals. The second one was to diversify oceanography and marine science, to try to help diversify that. Now, we're not, you know, we have to produce programs to do that, right? And the third was to help diversify what we represent in our media, right? Because if I was to say to you, we need an expert on squid, all right, we want to talk about a squid on camera. Who are we going to get to talk about squid on camera, right? It's going to be the same people, right? Who's an expert on this? So we were going around the world to these exotic locations, and people who've studied those locations are English scientists or German scientists or American scientists. So local involvement is essential for us. So what came out of the program was initiatives, and what one of the initiatives we're talking to here about is the initiative. What we felt was, if I put out an ad for a deckhand, we need a deckhand on our boat. I don't get a diverse application pool. If I put out an ad for a captain, I do not get a diverse application pool. For example, if I put an application for a deckhand, I'm going to get a lot of Filipinos, if you could believe that. And why is that? Because Philippines has made it its national interest to produce seafarers. So they are the largest production of seafarers in the world, the Philippines alone. They have the most people on cruise ships, on cargo ships. That's just the way that the Philippines decided to do that. But for example, if I wanted to find an African-American deckhand or a Latino deckhand, not an easy thing to do. So this idea of the plan that Veronica and I and Ian are putting together is to try to remedy that, to help remedy that situation. Because can Latinos be deckhands? Well, of course Latinos can be deckhands. Is there anything about it that stops, well, why don't I get them? Because probably they don't know how to get there, right? So let's see, that was the genesis of this whole program, was to try to make an avenue to lead people in that direction. You know, people from all walks of life love the ocean. It's a kind of a unifying theme, you know. It can be scary if you don't know a lot about it, but how do we sort of help that generation see that? So that was how we began that process. Because I know this from my own work, is you can take ads out, but if you don't get any diversity in the applicants, right? So we said, well, let's look out to see how we can do that. And we didn't find a single source that would help bring them together. And I said, well, if you can't find a single source, then you create it. And in our mind, the goal of this is to create this program at the end of the day, is to create a huge database of people who express interest from the high school level to the college level, who are a diverse group of people, of underrepresented members, to get them together and say, so every time a fellowship comes up or an opportunity comes up, we can throw it out to that group, right? We can just act the conduit to saying, okay, you like the ocean, you like media, you like science, you like being a crew member, here's an opportunity, go for it. Here's an opportunity, go for it. Because we, on the other side, have all these organizations, including our own. I just need a group of people that I can put an ad out to, that I can put an offer out to, rather than just getting the same old crowd. There's nothing wrong with the same old crowd, but they're not currently particularly diverse. Does that help that? Yes. I found myself getting frustrated by wanting to do something and not knowing exactly what to do. So we all got our heads together, and Veronica was extremely helpful at explaining, to some degree from her perspective, and I have the same viewpoint from my perspective, what are the barriers to getting folks into these businesses, right? There are a lot of paid scholarships. There's a lot of opportunity. If you don't know about it, like I didn't know that there was such a thing as a PhD scientist. So I grew up in a little town in Florida. I didn't know that such a thing existed. I went to college to be a doctor, and suddenly I found that this entire world existed, and I immediately went into it. So that's part of the goal of this.
Yeah, thank you.
It's 10:50, so I know some people have to get prepared for another class, but I'd like to run it to the end of the hour with you, Vince. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, sweet. Next up was Rana. She has some questions.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a more broad question, but I was wondering about OceanX adapting to COVID and adjusting to that virtual setting, because for a lot, it's exposed to a lot of organizational weak spots. So I was wondering what were the biggest challenges and what kind of like innovative solutions have there been to get over that hump, and are any worth holding on to going forward that you think are worth noting?
Wow, great question, because I can just tell you that we were finishing a large refit on a boat, multi-million-dollar, tens of millions of dollar refit on a vessel last year in March when COVID hit the world. In contracts, there's a thing called force majeure, which is a very extreme part of the contract where you say, because of, they call them acts of God, I cannot complete your contract. For the first time most of us have ever experienced, all companies around us were calling force majeure because they could not do things. So the shipyard said, we cannot get your boat done, your ship done on time. We had an entire production lined up. We had scientists, we had locations, we had permits to follow us into the Indian Ocean. The whole thing was destroyed overnight by COVID. Within a month, none of it happened. Force majeure from the production companies, force majeure so we were left essentially high and dry. And what we had to do was create a safe environment to try to continue to finish the production of the boat. So fortunately, the yard we were in the Netherlands reacted quickly, and we went along with it and helped test everybody, quarantine everybody, take temperatures. We immediately went to that. We got the boat done several months later than it was supposed to be done, because we went from 500 people on the boat to about 50. So immediately, but then we slowly brought them back up by running a safe environment in the yard. Then we were like, well, our entire season is shot. Now we've got this great boat. What do we do with it? the team threw together a trip in the Middle East, actually in the Red Sea, because we had an invitation to go there, because the country itself was going to help us with the permits and getting people. But boy, what a nightmare. We had to have every crew member had to be quarantined, coming from all over the world. We quarantined them for 14 days in hotel rooms. We had to find testing locally for everybody. I said we've probably run, 10,000 tests for COVID to try to keep our boat in a bubble, so that we could still, because boats are very expensive to run and you don't want to have them sitting around because, they've got a whole crew, there's a lot of sunk cost. So we managed to run expeditions while other boats were shut down. And you heard all about the cruise ships getting infected. It's the worst environment on a ship because everybody's living on top of each other. It's a great environment and it's a worse environment. In a submersible, you're 3 inches from each other for 8 hours. There's no way you're going to do that in a, socially distanced manner. So we had to create a bubble. So knock on wood, we have kept a bubble on our vessels since August of last year, not allowing people on, not allowing we we found positive people in quarantine that caught it from the hotels. We got it from repair people, everything, but we managed to keep the boat uninfected. And it was a major costly undertaking, but the alternative was to stop doing things. And I made the executive decision, being the leader of the group, to say, we're not stopping. We're not letting this get us down. We can't do this. We're scientists. We can figure this out. We're going to do it properly. And we did it properly. And thankfully now people are getting vaccinated. The boat's getting vaccinated. We're continuing to do it. But we also set up COVID testing on the boat, which we're finishing up hopefully in the next month, where we're actually doing the PCRs ourselves on board the boat. We ran those while we were off in remote locations. So boy, it was a nightmare. But let me tell you, it's not the last time this is going to happen to the society and the world. I lived through the AIDS crisis, and that was different, but also it reminded you of the necessary role that science plays in society. I think if anything has taught us a lesson, I think it should teach all of you that COVID is a reminder of how important science and scientific discovery and science is into our lives. And we managed to go from not knowing what it was in March to having a vaccine by December, which is unheard of in the history of any disease. We don't have a vaccine for HIV yet, right? So most of these things, but people really killed it, and the science community really, really pulled together and did this. So I'm proud of our community to do that. And I think it reminds you of the value and the importance of that kind of rational scientific thought process. So anyway, that's my soapbox.
Yeah, I would add, just in terms of things moving forward, when I was on the ship, right, like when we're doing a classroom or a live transmission from the ship, right, because there are so many students at home looking for content, it's on fire, right? So even this class, right? So, and when I did some reporting from the ship as well, right? So there's something here, right? There's something about how we're now getting more used to remote teaching and getting more locations into the classroom and more people. And even like, having Vince here today, like, no, I wouldn't be able to fly him out, right? He wouldn't come, he wouldn't be in your classroom, right? And now we get all these incredible people to show up in the classroom, right? So I'd say that's something that we're carrying forward.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. I think to Ian's point, unless society had been immersed in this and forced to sit home and do this, we all wouldn't want to do this. We all prefer to be together. But to what everybody's discovering, the large companies, are that parts of life, people like doing this. It's better, it's easier, it's efficient. It's, by the way, it's less gasoline for airplanes or less kerosene, right? It's it's good for the environment to do this. And it's better to be there with you guys in your class, but sometimes that's just impractical, but this isn't impractical. So I think COVID has changed your world, and media is more important than ever, right? And the production of it and this interaction is more important than ever.
Kendra.
Yeah, so I know you guys mentioned how one of your goals is diversifying and also reaching a younger audience. So my question to you guys, or I guess one of the ways to do this, I think, would be to reach kids in lower income communities. So my question is, do you guys currently have any inclusion strategies that you're utilizing to do this?
So let me do what Ian does and ask you about that. How would you do that?
Well, I think one of the great ways would be to I don't know how easy this would be right now given COVID, but to go to these schools in these communities and talk to the kids in person, especially, you know, I'm coming from a low income community in California where I lived, you know, maybe like 20 minutes away from the ocean. I didn't even see the ocean until I was probably like 13. And I know that this is this is like common in a lot of these communities where people of color make up the majority. So I feel like
how would I have gotten to you? Do you just at that age? Let's say when you hadn't reached the ocean till you were 13. How would I reach you? You're saying go directly to the school and you go into the school and have a conversation in forgetting COVID, go in there and have that conversation. That's challenging, and only in the sense of there's a lot of schools.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, but finding, events like this are much easier. Live events that are digital, or if there was a way, and I think this is an opportunity, maybe if someone came to me, let's say you came to me and said, I have, 20 schools in the LA area that I could bring you to over a 2-day period of time. And someone arranged a lecture for me to give a half an hour at each school, 5 a day, I would do it. But I think if I had to fly to Arizona to go to one school and talk, it would be practically difficult to do that, right? It would just be hard to do that. It would be nice to that school. So if there was a service or a way or an interface that would allow us to, like almost like a lecture circuit, as opposed to being a TED talk to a bunch of rich people, I would prefer, honestly, to do a lecture series through LA to talk to schools, to people like you, much more than I would do to people at TED conference, all honesty, because it's an audience that's never seen this. It's just for me in this position is how to do that, is how to find the schools, how to schedule it. It's this practical things that, if you told me tomorrow that in Connecticut somewhere I could go to a school and speak, and I've done this as a college professor at Yale, I've gone 50, 60 times to high schools in my area when they do invite me, right, to talk about anything. Unfortunately, it turns out to be in Westport and in places that, they're somewhat on the ball and they know that they'll call us, but I prefer the ones where I go to where they don't. So I love that question. I sort of want an answer for that question, that I feel like we could do that.
I have a version of that question, Kendra. If you came on the ship, right, and you were to create content, right, and create a distribution strategy in which to reach these, what would that look like? Like, what would be compelling? Like, first of all, would it have to be like translated into Spanish, or what are the aspects of it that might help you specifically? Like, this is a real thing. Like, we had you come on the ship, and then you brought to us also a strategy, which is to say, hey, I want to create content for these people, right? What would that look like?
Do they want to hear it from me? First of all, I wouldn't know how to create the strategy properly because I'm not there. I need you to help with that, and probably would be good to go and give a talk myself with you there at my side, just because it's easier in a way for people to recognize people that they, to say, okay, this person is there, I could be there. If they look at me, they may not feel that way as easily, right? Although I came from a very poor background as well, but not with the same difficulties at all. I'm implying that, but anyways, like that is, I think you're absolutely right, Ian. I think you guys can help us with this, because as you can imagine, we're trying to produce programs for Disney, which is a whole different thing, right? But this is even more challenging almost for us, because I love the question and I love a solution for it. I would love a solution for it, and I would be all about a solution for it. And maybe that, to me, that's the take home for us, is to you guys to help us in, no matter what your background is here, whether you come from a school like that or a wealthy school or whatever, what's our in? How do we get into that? How do we present and bring it to them? How do you bring it? But also, how do we bring it? And what content are they going to be responsive to? If I get up and start pontificating about things that are not relevant and don't understand or they don't like, it's not going to get their interest. We like to show videos. We like to show really cool stuff because it piques people's interest. So that's the kind of approach we take. Right? I unfortunately, Ian, I have got to jump. I have
That's
someone
it.
sitting on another line at 2 for me to
Thank
do
you
another
so much,
education
Vince.
course.
This was a
This
great
is so great to meet you guys. And Ian, I thank you for inviting me, and I'm always up for more interactions. Just let me know how I can help.
Yeah, well, I think we'll have these students be cranking on some ideas and thoughts and solutions, and we'll be in touch.
Perfect. Ian, great to meet you.
Thank you,
Veronica, did Veronica jump? Is she still there?
Yeah, she jumped already.
She jumped. Okay. Yes. Thank you all. Thank you guys. And
Thank you.
keep up the good work. You're in a great program, and you're in a great direction. Take care.
Thanks, Vince.
All right. Bye, Ian.
All right, cool. I got office hours in the next hour if anybody wants to queue in, and I will put some more details about the assignment on the website. I think I might cue off this conversation a little bit in terms of the profiles and this idea of opening up young students' minds about job opportunities, right? So that's going to be the focus of this website assignment. Trying to identify a mentor, a job, a person, and do a bit of a profile on what that job is, right? Who is that person and what is that job like, to help communicate these opportunities to the world, right?